So nice to see everybody. Hi. On this beautiful Saturday morning. My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. I'm thrilled to see all of you here for the very first panel at the 20th anniversary festival. The panels series is one of the most important parts of the festival, is where we bring together some of the most influential, accomplished people from the industry, whether they're directors, screenwriters, producers, actors, influencers, distributors, members of the press, who can really talk to you in depth with a lot of experience about what it is that they do and share their experiences with you and hopefully inspire and empower others to follow their careers and do good work. So before I bring them, I just want to say a few thanks to our sponsors, because the festival is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and without contributions, financial contributions from donors, individuals, foundations, companies, we couldn't be here. So I would like to thank Marketech, who has been with us since 2000, as well as 120 dB Films, and Gray Schwartz, and BMI, and Gigantic Pictures, and a lot of foundations. Yes, Gigantic. A lot of foundations and individuals who help us make it, survive, grow, and flourish ever since 2000, do our work throughout the year and during the film festival. So thank you all very, very much for supporting us. And now, you know, the festival has a spotlight on women in film. This is an issue that has been extremely important to me for many, many years now. I'm sure you know that the disparity between the genders in the entertainment industry, as well as just across the board, and we at the Woodstock Film Festival try to do our part to bridge the gap as much as we can. And we have gathered here some really incredible members of the film industry to talk to you about their work, trajectory, and where they're going from here. So I would love to bring, first of all, Geraldine Dreyfus, who is our moderator. So if you can come up here. Thank you, Geraldine. And I think you're sitting in the middle there. Oh, where are you? And then I would like to bring the rest of the panelists, Hillary Brower, and Pamela Yates, and Julie Tamer, and Liz Garbus, and Lisa Cortez. I think I have all of you. Hi, everybody.
You're at the very end, Julie.
They did.
Oh. Okay.
Well, Lisa is at the very end. She knows where she is. That's good.
All right.
Well, welcome everybody. And I'm just now passing the microphone to Geraldine, who's going to moderate the panel. Thank you all for being here, and thank you.
Good morning. So I had the great pleasure of speaking with everybody on this panel except Lisa, because she was driving from New York, where she had the premiere of, oh, it wasn't the premiere, it was a community screening of her newest film, The Apollo, at the Apollo last night. So we asked her what time she had to leave, and she said, I don't know. It was just early. So I think what we kind of gleaned was there's some workforce issues that are coming up that people want to talk about, you know, sort of structural industry work. So there's kind of the idea of point of view, and are we really getting the representation and point of view of storytelling that we want to see as filmmakers? Do we feel like it's being reflected in the work? There's some questions around collaboration and integration of, you know, how people are evolving their own business models. Liz Garbus has just started a new company, and so has Pamela. So it's sort of like the field building side of what's going on. So we're going to touch on a lot of things, but I just wanted to plant some seeds and hopefully make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions or thoughts that kind of align with any of that. So I think I'm gonna start with let's see, I'm going to start with Julie because she's so amazing and so many of us have looked up to her as an example of someone that is bold and absolutely sets very new and original standards for anything that she does. And sort of the bar that you raise for yourself, but also the kind of idea that you don't think we're raising it high enough for us collectively as women. And maybe we can just,
That idea?
yeah, start with that. Maybe start with that. Julie Taymor, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think Geraldine and I were talking. I have a film that will be coming out after January. We don't have a distributor, so we don't know. But it's the Gloria Steinem book, My Life on the Road, and it's called The Glorias. And I think that when we tried to take this book with Julianne Moore attached, and myself and Gloria Steinem, to Hollywood to raise the money, we kept being told, you know, under $10 million. Now, I know for a lot of people, even on this panel, that's a good amount of money, but at a certain point, when you're doing Gloria Steinem's life with all the other women involved, if you know this book, there are 10 other major women who are represented, who inspired, influenced, and are part of the second wave of feminism, very important, and her life from 1940 to the present, you just sit there going, no. How many LBJ movies do we need? How many Martin Luther King movies? How many of these great leaders that we've seen in television form, TV movies, theater, this and that, and we don't have one feature film on a living woman and her comrades. I have to say, you know, because it's called The Glorias because it's a lot more than just Miss Steinem. So I just backed off and said, no, we're going to find it, which we did, find enough to do the story, and it was a struggle, but we still could do it. And I think what Geraldine's referring to is, I do think women settle for less than men do. I think in general, the sights aren't, the aim isn't set high enough. And I'm not saying that we should go out and be Trumps and say we're the greatest. And, you know, there is a difference. Even in this Gloria story, you see that one of the great things about her is that she serves other people, that she's there. It's a wonderful balance of being an incredible presence, but at the same time being a listener. You know, all the things you get from who she is and the people that she knows it's a different way of having power, and I understand that, and I think that's one of the things that is great about women and why it would be wonderful to have a good woman president. I mean, there could be really terrible women leaders, so we all know that, terrible heads of studios, terrible, terrible, terrible women producers, you know, it's not. But at its best, I think that there is a difference, and I think one of the things that I get tired of is when you hear about the awards for new upcoming women and their $5,000 here or you know, like, okay, we're gonna give no, I really believe that I was very lucky then, you know, to have the support on my first feature was actually a very large budget for Titus. And you know, you see it in a lot of men who get an opportunity, and we get really angry. Well, how did that guy who did nothing get $200 million to do this Marvel comic, and this woman who's been there on and has worked and worked, and now she's got $7 million to do. Now, I'm not saying you can't make a phenomenal movie for $30,000, because you can. And you can make a phenomenal movie at any rate and a really bad movie at 200. But what happens is women's ambitions and their imaginations get pressed into something that's affordable and that looks like it might have a market. That's what we were saying.
Yeah.
And that, I didn't go through that. So I am a lucky one in the theater. You know, I mean, I think that you just have to put those blinders on and say, well, what is it that I want to do? And then you need to be able to have the support system, which means women who support women have to say, let's just go for it. Let's really go for it. Because when you start to do that little bit of, well, maybe that should be not, that kind of movie shouldn't be that kind, then you're already undermining the power of what you're trying to say and the audience. And I think even with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie, we saw, wow, how did that get that off? There's a hunger out there. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's one of the issues that I always feel that women should really try and get over.
Bust out of. And one of the things that was so lovely is that Gloria, in allowing Julie to make the film said, I want Julie to be able to make the film that Julie wants to make. And so it's sort of this idea of how you want to pick the artist and support the artist. And I'd love, Lisa is here both as a producer and a director. She has a film here at the festival. And one of the things that I've learned is that, having great producers that believe in you as an artist, Liz can speak to this too. Like, what does it feel, what is required to be supported as a director so you can actually achieve your vision? So Lisa, you want to start in both roles, or?
So on the producing, directing?
Producing, directing, then.
Well, I have a film that's screening tomorrow at 11:15. It's called The Remix, Hip Hop Times Fashion. And it is about these incredible women who you never heard of, but have influenced not only hip hop fashion and culture, but the runways, and in turn, global culture. And I wanted to tell this story for many years. I started out in the music business at Def Jam, and I wasn't the only woman there. There was a lot of incredible women behind the scenes, and as all these hip hop documentaries started coming out, we were painted out of the picture, and I really felt a need to start resetting this narrative about who established this culture that has had such a tremendous effect. So from my music business background in management and working with artists, I kind of, and being an artist, which took me a long time to be able to say that, I kind of have a 360 on process, and delivery and audience. And I think that those things are continuously going through my head when I'm working on a project. The journey to directing is really about my personal evolution and challenging myself, and feeling if there's a story that, sticks to my guts, that, I have to find a means and a team of allies to realize them.
That's great. So Liz and Pamela, why don't you talk a little bit about, you both have new companies that you've started that kind of grew out of your work, and maybe just share that, because I think that's the other thing that we're seeing is we're in a moment right now where there's a lot of women-led production companies, and there's a lot of need for capital to be invested in production companies, and some of the great filmmakers that are women are needing to get that inflection of capital so that they can then go after and compete for larger projects. But Liz is both addressing that systemically, and Pamela has done a niche of the body of work that you do. So do you want to start, Pamela?
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today. Skylight, it's a company that we started many years ago, but about 5 years ago we realized that what we were doing was so much more than producing films. And so we transitioned to being a nonprofit human rights media organization. And what does that mean? Because a lot of journalists, many journalists have said, well, are you a human rights activist or are you an artist? And I really said, I'm both. And they said, but what % are you artists and what % are you activists? And I said, 100% and 100%. And one of the ways I like to describe it is attorneys, human rights lawyers. What do? They use the law to practice human rights. And that's really what we do at Skylight as well. So very early on, with our first film in 1982, When the Mountains Tremble, we realized that when we made a film, and we were able to take the film out in collaboration with the protagonists in the film, these are documentary films, so these are real people, and go around the world, that it actually helped create a virtuous cycle between the film, the protagonists in the film, and what it was that they were trying to accomplish. And for each of the feature films, we then tried to expand this model, better this model, and then when we made the transition to a nonprofit human rights organization, to share that model. So that meant that not only did we make the feature-length documentaries, but we had a multi-year outreach and engagement campaign, and that we created a media ecosystem around each feature-length documentary, as well as share the model through laboratories that brought together social justice actors as well as documentary filmmakers so we could learn to work better together and improve the impact. And to your point, Julie, how is it that we have and take power? And so I think there are a myriad of ways that women can do this in both the nonfiction and the fiction realm, and we should be exploring all of these ways because I think that's really going to change the landscape. I know all of us are imagining the world we want to live in, especially considering the world we do live in right now. And so I'm really happy to be a part of this panel with all of these great women that I know are doing the same thing.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to just touch back to something that Julie said, teeing all of this up, which is the sort of psychological aspect of what you ask for. And I think what's so interesting is I always ask for it. I ask for a lot. My mother is there; she'll confirm. But I'll have that little tape in my head that says, "Did I go too far? Is that too much? Are they going to leave?" You know, right? And what was so wonderful, and I directed my first scripted feature this past year, which will be coming out in the beginning of next year, and I had a female producer, a wonderful producer named Ann Carey, who had produced, has produced so many scripted movies. She's amazing. And just having her at my side being like, no, we're going to ask for that. Yeah, like, no doubt, we're going to ask for that. And having that check, and having it be a woman, it just made me kind of know, that was just an amazing support, like that producer-director relationship of me wanting and knowing, okay, this is going to get bigger, but you got to do it, but then not feeling like, and there's that tape that's like, well, if Amanda asked for it, what would, that whole tape that runs, and I wish I could just turn the tape off. I wish I could, and maybe as life goes on, and I do, because I think I've made a lot of documentaries. In the world of documentary, I feel very comfortable knowing exactly what the limit is, what I can ask for, and reaching to it. In the world of fiction, maybe I'll get there. But it was an interesting sort of tape that kept running in my head, and it took up space. Like, I wanted to get rid of it because there are other things to be worrying about. I don't want to worry about, did I ask too much? Did I go too far? And having that producer partner who was always there and, and who has produced for lots of male directors, et cetera, to say, no, I think we can get this, or no, oh, you know what, we're probably not going to get that. It's just probably not going to happen. And the last movie I did with so-and-so, we didn't get that, and, so I think this is reasonable. And having that kind of collaboration was so important, and I'd like to be able to turn off the tape. So that's sort of my note. On to Geraldine's question about companies. I've made documentaries for, 25 years. I've made a lot of them, and as there's an explosion in distribution outlets for good nonfiction content, not just, documentary, which sometimes can be, a term that's bastardized into kind of like bad news magazine shows, but actually an explosion of outlets and audience for good, great nonfiction storytelling. I found that I was at a point where there are a lot of ideas which come to me that I would love to be involved with, I just couldn't direct. And as I was moving into making a scripted movie, I knew I would be completely subsumed with that. And how do I, as an artist, get into a place where I can explore different medium, but still have the kind of this meat and potatoes documentary company that I've been doing for so long run and producing the work that we've been doing. Just so happens that my husband, who runs Impact Partners with Geraldine, was also noticing a shift in the industry, and that shift was, with this explosion of content, places like Netflix, they, instead of going to Sundance and paying, a gajillion dollars for that hot documentary that everybody was bidding on, they wanted to produce it. They wanted, there was much more of a desire to own and control and get in on projects and kind of pull back the checkbook a bit at Sundance. They still bring it out. There was a huge sale at Sundance Knock Down the House, the film that chronicled AOC and other candidates running this for 2018, but that was the trend. And so what we did between the two of us was collaborated and created a company, and with Dan's kind of background in Impact Partners, there was capital there for this to build out from what I had started and create a home for multiple filmmakers to develop stories. And if books came to me that I thought would make a great doc, but I couldn't make, that to try to produce it, to still have a way to participate in it and kind of guarantee to the buyer, it'll be good, I promise you, but bring in other filmmakers to work with us. And then also to think about the exploding other areas for nonfiction storytelling, which are podcasts and of course short form. There's going to be something soon on your phone called Quibi, which is going to have incredible content, all short, and you can only watch it on your phone. So it's about kind of taking advantage of these opportunities for these appetites, this audience appetite, at the same time as, but ensuring films that make you think, that make you feel, that educate you, and are super well done. And that's kind of was the idea of this collaboration between us. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think what I love is that it's artist-driven. Like, you're thinking about who should tell the story and what's the point of view that we haven't heard from. And we're hearing that more and more, like that you're really like looking at an idea that needs to be packaged. Sounds crass, but it's sort of like, who do you want to, who can we bring in?
Who tells the story? Who's the storyteller?
Who's the storyteller? And I think that's increasingly, there's increasing numbers of people that are trying to support that artistic vision. And I'm just thinking about, there's a documentary that Dave Dinnersmith is here as a juror on, called The Summer of Harlem, that is going to be made, and Questlove is going to direct it. And it's interesting, it was sort of like you kept hearing, well, Questlove is going to direct it, so you want to give him the support that he deserves as an artist. Julie Taymor is going to do this on Gloria Steinem. It's Gloria and Julie. You want to give them the support they deserve to make the best film possible. And it's hard because you bump up against what the market tells you can and can't do, and then that idea of becoming smaller happens. But Hillary, talk a little bit about your own experience there and how you've navigated or pushed back or advocated for.
Let's see, I guess I'm going to speak to becoming smaller. But no, I've worked on features at a few different budget levels. Also, everybody here is a hybrid of some kind, and I'm a hybrid educator and filmmaker. I chair at Columbia in their film program, and I teach there. That's my day job, and I'm not done making features. I intend to keep going. But the one before this last one, where I became smaller, had a high budget, but zero creative control. I tried to get my name off, and it didn't work out. And after that, I took a deep breath and said, I have been trying to make films since I was a little girl, literally 14 years old is all I ever wanted to do. Make kind of arty narratives and play with a camera and get something out of actors and explore the world. And I decided to kind of go back to that, making a very small budget film for less than $100,000 that my family helped out on. And I wanted to do some things formally and creatively differently, and I also wanted to get to know the economics of the whole system from the ground up, because I thought for too long I've been kind of passively accepting what the world tells me about why my films aren't marketable. And I thought, well, this way I'm going to get in there and I'm going to learn, and this fits my mission as an educator as well as a filmmaker, because I'm in a unique position to experiment. Because with that less than $100,000 budget means I'm not getting paid, but I have a job, so I can do that. So that's what I did, and it was really interesting. It's when I made my first film in '97, the biggest cost item in the budget is the camera, and the editing system is next. On this film, it was room and board and minivans, which is not insubstantial, but everything else, my husband's a DP, so everything else was literally in our closet. The camera was in our closet, and a lot of the crew were alums. One of the producers were close female friends, Susan Stover, who's done a bunch of films, and my friend Maria Rosenblum, who also has a lot going on in her life. I also have kids as well as the job. So we edited over a year and a half, which was really interesting. I know at some point we're going to talk about different models of working. And it was hell trying to figure out what's a codec, how do you export, like what is this nonsense? But it was really liberating to not have any other voices in my head. And I recognize that this is a position of privilege that I am in to do this. And I'm certainly out there trying to get the money back. But it's been very interesting to do it and to see things with my own eyeballs, which, you know, I figured I could justify that because I'd have some answerability to myself about my life journey, but I could also share it. So that's how I came to become small. It wasn't that I thought, oh, this is a small story, it was just, no, I need to touch it tactily, and I need to also be in direct control, accountability. I need to take accountability, and I need to really just like look at filmmaking on a very molecular level. Now, the film also turned out to be, you know, about family in a way that using my family and this area, I'm from this area, turned out to be very, you know, there was some aesthetic use to that as well. So I don't think all women should be small. I agree with Julie and everybody here. Everybody deserves to get paid and push forward. And I am really psyched to see a lot of my alumna out there kicking it, just really making changes. Things have shifted dramatically in the last few years. We are not there yet, oh no, but it is exciting to see a sort of critical mass and to see, you know, the big rocks start to move a little bit in fundamental ways. And I think it's going to take a lot of continued pushing. I also, over the years, I've never met a female sales rep. I know they're out there. Sales rep are the people who take your film at a festival and sell it to companies. And I know they're there. I've seen their names. I've just never gotten to meet with one of them for whatever reason. I've emailed with a few, but I think it goes beyond what we do as directors, writers, and producers to an entire marketplace. And I just want to say one thing about Netflix, because I learned recently that Netflix, they think in terms of something called taste clusters, as opposed to demographics. They do not use the word demographic, which in a way is kind of cool, because we don't have to be cordoned into these little piles of humans that are cordoned off from each other. Our taste clusters can blend. Taste is fluid. But on the other hand, they aren't buying indie content. They're controlling the content, and they're thinking about and prescribing what that taste is. So I do think we have to keep pushing back at the new studios to be more democratic. But I also think we can start to say, to hell with this, you know, this is for women of this age and this race and so forth, because that's no longer the truth. So there's an opportunity.
You know, I'm not on Netflix's, you know, I don't have a Netflix email, but I will say, though, that there's something quite extraordinary about making a film for them. The film that I made, which will be coming out next year, was first at Warner Brothers. It was developed at Warner Brothers, and it had a female lead. They kept on trying to work the script to increase the roles of the male characters. We couldn't, it wasn't that story when I did. So we ended up taking it out of Warner Brothers and taking it over to Amazon. Wonderful people working at Amazon. But at the end of the day, for the female lead, you know, and what this, it was like, basically, yeah, you know, if you can get, you know, Tom Hanks to play that like 5-page role, then we can finance this movie at the level that you need it to be financed. And, you know, there was money against the movie, so it wasn't cheap because it had been at Warner Brothers for some period of time. It's a couple of years at Amazon, you know, with different, and even if it was, you know, Kate Winslet in the leading role, we still had to look at, I mean, and it was such, the male roles in my movie, they're not great. Like they come in and out. Like they're not. It's not about them. So we weren't going to get a fabulous actor to, you know, like a great A-list actor, and we just, but still they were like, well, let's just wait for their agent. Maybe they'll do it. They like your documentaries, you know, blah blah blah. So 6 months. We realized it's never going to happen because the box office number of even the top female actresses, except for maybe a few young ones, and my lead is a 50-year-old woman. It doesn't work. So then we took it to Netflix, and within 6 months we moved into production because my lead is not a movie star. She's an incredible actress. And the men, I mean, we ended up with Gabriel Byrne playing that supporting role, but he was still not the kind, cause, you know, he was still not the actor that could have gotten it done at Amazon. And we made the movie within 6 months. So That and Amy Ryan who's an incredible actress, is the anchor of the movie. That could not have happened in a traditional studio model. So the taste clusters, the algorithms, yes, but the freedom was extraordinary, and the movie got made. And I mean, they call it, so it's like $16 million and under, and their budget levels are called independent film. And essentially, they gave my producer, Ann Carey, the money, and she made the movie. It's not like working for a studio.
Right, there are myriad ways, right? It's not an either or.
Yeah.
It's the many approaches.
I was just saying that for female-driven stories, that was an incredible, I would not have made the movie without them.
Are you going to have a release in theaters?
Yes.
So how long are they?
Well, they're doing what they're doing for Marriage Story, and what they're doing, which is a week in the theater. And that is a sacrifice, but I'll tell you something, I'm a little bit over that argument. This is how people see movies. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I don't think she's been to the movies in a year. I mean, she watches everything on her TV and computer, and I'm a little bit over you don't get a proper theatrical. I mean, I know it feels great, but I'll look at, and then for awards, people have been upset Netflix out, but this year, the Best Picture, I mean, Netflix has created probably some of the top contenders for Best Picture, The Irishman, Marriage Story, what am I not thinking of?
No, it's just, the thing is that women now coming into being more women directing. I mean, there always have been some great women from the beginning of the
course,
time.
yeah.
But it's ironic that finally, when it's happening, it's more for television. And the only reason I say that.
It's not actually television.
But it is television because it's different than being in an audience.
It is, and you
and-
have the opportunity to be in the audience.
For a
but
week. And I'm not doing
yeah.
that, I'm just saying that it is, you're at a film festival here, and there is, I know because we had one teeny little screening for The Glorious, it's not done yet, but being in a room with 20 people was so vastly different than watching it.
Yeah,
Because
but you know
people.
who just made their movie for Netflix? Martin Scorsese. I don't think it's about, the Irish.
No. Martin Scorsese made it for $160 million, and no one studio would have ever paid for that.
Exactly.
So I'm not saying
It's
not.
a gendered thing.
No, I'm just saying that it's ironic and sad that when women are finally getting in the role of more women are directing, and they're not getting the atmosphere that you get when you're in a theater. That's all.
But that's the state of the industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm
okay.
talking about the state of the industry.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I'm saying it's phenomenal that women are doing a lot of the cable shows and, getting the opportunity to do unusual things. What I do coming from the theater years ago still, but also knowing that if you go to a Beatles concert when you were 15 years old, women's presence, women in audiences are so accessible, more, especially American. You will get an energy, and that is what I just feel like you must have just gone through this.
I'm still going through it.
Yes, and what I'm saying is, I know what she means.
So we did though, because we're going to be on HBO, and it's a wonderful place to be. We have been showing the Apollo at festivals
All over, yeah.
all over. We have been trumping, from Nantucket to Black Star to San Francisco. So that, I think, is what we have to do as filmmakers now, because of the way that the
Industry
models of
is, yeah.
distribution have changed. When I, produced The Woodsman as an independent film, and we went to Sundance and we sold it, that world doesn't exist anymore. That you can make provocative $3.5 million films, and they get picked up and you can return the money to your investors. The value of what we do now exists in a very different ecosystem. And so it's our evolution, and I think it's interesting what you're doing, Pamela, is keeping, one foot with your protagonists and your subjects in the community while continuing to make the product and get it out there. I think toggling is, that's my favorite word.
Toggle.
I think we have to toggle
I
back
like
and
that.
forth
Yeah.
between our intention and the marketplace.
Right, and sometimes we have to take into account a free pay model. What do I mean by that? Well, if you keep control of your films, you can segment it for different markets, but if you have control of it, it also means that you can give the film away for free in places where they're not going to pay for it. Okay, so we've done a trilogy of films about Guatemala and indigenous resistance in Guatemala. We usually give a high-res file to the biggest bootlegger in Guatemala. His name is El Buki, and he reproduces it and puts it on, all those sheets, those cellophane sheets of DVDs that you see in marketplaces around the world. Because, you want a human rights film to be bootlegged. And so, part of it is how do we balance between getting the greatest number of eyeballs in the best possible venue with getting it out around the world, that people who are your natural audience, that if you went through and listened always to the distributor or the sales agent, they would never get it. It would never reach. Toggle.
Toggle, you heard it here. I'm going to open it up to you in the audience because I'm sure you might have individual questions for some of our panelists or just some thoughts or where you are in your own journey. And does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask or comments? Because we've got lots of other, okay, right in the back, thank you.
to express your voice. And that now, as it's been said, now we're moving forward so that we're watching movies, on this and creating them for a 5-minute attention span to tell the entire story of a life in 5 minutes on this, which is, I think, an interesting comment. I was wondering, I wanted to ask the panel, what do you all think of now we have VR, which is so compelling and so powerful to each individual individually. What do you think of the idea of gigantic screens, and how do you feel about the vision of filmmaking in that context? I guess what do you think is going to happen when it does?
So does
Yeah,
any-
we heard.
Yep,
Yeah, we
so
heard you.
I think the
Yeah.
idea is like the changing landscape of how films and content is delivered. What do we miss, lament, or see, or any?
To continue to have gigantic, films displayed.
Well, the ones that are still being done are the Marvel comics. Event films are where people want to go and see, and who is deciding that those are the only ones that are event films? That is the issue. Is there something else that would draw a large audience? Obviously, I would think music film. There are many other things that could draw a large audience to want to be in the room at the same time. They'll go to concerts. People will go and pay a lot of money to go to concerts. So it just hasn't been figured out yet, because with all the new technology, people just get fascinated. Now I can see it on my, it just keeps going and getting smaller. But I do think that there's always going to be the need to get out of the house and to communicate with other people and to be physically in the room. Broadway does pretty well. People will travel to go see these god-awful music, and I'm sorry, but they'll just go. No, really, that's just my own. But they like being in the space, and I'm very big on the space. I think that when the Taj Mahal or the beautiful cathedrals in Rome or in Firenze or whatever, when you go into a space, is why people have ritual weddings happen in churches, or an event happens in a gorgeous mosque or whatever it is. It changes everything. And if we know anything now, we have a worse communication than we had before. So I think there is an enormous room to go back to the live experience, but not everything belongs. There are films that work better on television, or that work as well in an intimate place, or with a few people. But then I just was lamenting, that's all I meant, that now that there are more women directors, storytellers, and producers out there, I don't want them to just feel like that's your only place, which is cable television, or, even though the stories are better, even though you'll see better stuff for the most part, at this point, I still think, because I'm a theater baby from way back, I know what it's like when you're in that 1,000-seat house or 500-seat house, what the energy does. And I think people need that. I think it's a really lost experience, which is this. I mean, you guys could just stay at home, right? I mean, we don't need to be here. You can get everything that all of us say very easily from the internet, but that's not what you want. But look at how old you are. I don't see too many, I mean, it's true, though.
She's calling out your demographic,
I'm
ladies
calling
and gentlemen.
out the
Julie
demographic.
Taymor
Let me see if
is
there
calling you
anybody
old.
here under 20. Do we have somebody under 20? Raise your hand. Yay. Higher. No, but they're missing something. It's and you know they are, and there's a lot of depression about it. You know, texting is not the same. Don't you all feel, I call on the telephone because I want to hear the tone of voice. I feel like if it was reverse, that we started texting and then all of a sudden the telephone was invented, we'd be going, oh my God.
Yeah. No, telephone is the new email.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you want someone to pay attention? Call them on
Call
the
them on
phone.
the and it will go faster and you won't wait for the reply. You know, I mean, it's just so interesting what has gone with what has come. And there are great things
Yeah,
that have
I
come.
also, can I just, my only point modifying that point, which I 100% agree with, was that it's about those comic book movies. It's about creative freedom. The fact that it's not necessarily about gender. Scorsese had to go to Netflix to have the creative freedom he wanted. I could only get my movie made at Netflix because I got freed of box office concerns. So, but I understand what you're saying is as we enter, we are working in a different business model that you're lamenting, which I understand. And I think it's also about what's the story. I mean, I saw The Irishman in a theater. I saw Marriage Story in a theater. They're movies. I mean, like the fact that I was in a seat watching them from beginning to end, that was the divine way to see them. And people will have that opportunity with those films and with my film. And there are some films that perhaps, I mean, when we talk about the 5-minute content on the phones, that's not these movies. That nobody's saying you should tell the Glorias in 5 minutes. I'm just talking about an explosion of outlets. There are some things that should be 5 minutes, you know, and but I'm not suggesting that they would tell Julie to make her movie as a 5-minute movie.
Oh, yeah?
I'm just saying, okay, maybe they did. But in any case, I'm talking about the explosion can be very good, and it can be wonderful for people who are just starting out to be able to make something and have distribution, and, you know, that there are those portals to get started.
Yes.
Why do you think that the creative powers, producers, directors, don't have more influence in changing that distribution model? I mean, I'm at the Jacob Burns. We show Fleabag every week. We fill the theater. When RBG came out, the women came back in droves, in groups, to watch the film twice and 3 times, paying admission.
Yeah.
And it seems odd to me that with all of these creatives in the industry feeling like everyone's being robbed, both the consumer and the.
I think they don't know, honestly. I just don't think there's any proof. That's why I mentioned the RBG thing. I guess I'm having this hopeful feeling that women will, not just women, everybody, honestly, will come out in droves to see the Glorias. But I'll tell you, that's not where Hollywood, it's not a normal Hollywood film. It's not. It's a road picture. Road pictures are not women's pictures. There's no male, like what you were saying, there are no male, there's a small male lead, her father, and that's it. And Timothy Hutton is wonderful. But we don't do the boyfriends. They're not important. The boyfriends are not the issue. It's the women, the camaraderie.
Yeah, we had
It's
no
like
boyfriends.
meetings with remarkable women is what Glorious is about. It's the meetings with remarkable women. You don't think that women want to see that? I just think that there is a slow hole in Hollywood in the distribution, and I think there's an enormous amount of fear. And they have the fear of the power of Netflix and the television that has really, for some reason, has been able to give these opportunities. Where do they get their money from? And they never say how much. We don't know how much. They don't have box office receipts. They don't have any of that. So it's a mystery. But I even know that the young women working in those studios, they're too frightened to say what they want to see because they'll lose their job. You know, it's the same thing. They're not going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, we think this could happen.
But it's also all very, very new, right? I mean, with Roma last year, they allowed it to be in the theaters and on Netflix, and people went to the movies to see it. And so that's a data point which they're using, you know, and let's see what happens with The Irishman. So it's all very new. It's been like 3 years of this only. So let's see how it creeps up. And as more people go, you know, maybe there are these bifurcated models. Some people won't leave their homes, but lots of people will. And maybe the industry will expand as we see it, because it's all so new.
I think also speaking to, like, you know, a big part of this is who is in the studios, who has the power to recognize what has value. And that's slowly beginning to change. I'm really proud that, you know, the woman who runs Michael B. Jordan's company, she started with me as an intern. The woman at Nyjah at Warner Brothers, you know, her films are everything from Just Mercy to A Star is Born. These are both incredible young African-American women who are just at the beginning of their careers in this system. And that gives me a lot of hope. What's difficult right now is we are midstream. You know, over 100 years ago, we made this transition from an agrarian base to a, you know, machine base. We are now going in from machine to tech that celebrates different parts of how we create and how we distribute. And going back to the Jacob Burns, I mean, like, you've curated.
That's right, I was
you
gonna say
know,
that.
and studios don't curate. You know, like they're like tent poles. Tent poles are candy, and I think after a while, they will continue to go, but some of that steam might run out. And there will be that space for us to continue to push for the power of convening and to play with all these different new modes. I think that's our challenge, is how can we play with all these different elements, but go back to that essential human desire to gather together and to try and to create work that tries to make sense of all this craziness that we see out there. Because isn't that like how it all got started?
Exactly. That's beautifully said, Lisa. And I wanted to also just say, to your point, Miss Jacob Burns, it is about curation, and you've done an amazing job, and you're a leader in the country. So people, not only do you have audiences, no, seriously. I started a film center in 20 years ago, and I used to just thank God for the internet, because I used to steal your programming ideas in Film Forum and I brought them to Utah, and they work there too. So it's like part of it, a lot of it is the curation and the audience building, and people then just come to trust your taste, and they also want to bring people that they love along for the ride. So, and then you go back, and that is what word of mouth happens, and we don't have that. They don't have that in art houses the way we did either, because the marketing of these films has become so small, you know, and people are inventing new ways of doing it. So
That's a big thing, is the loss of the art house cinema.
yeah, I
When I was in college, I remember
Yeah.
going to York Square Cinema, and I saw everything from Betty Blue to, you know, concert, like those cinemas, and like, look, we've lost them in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was the place where I discovered, you know, Eric Romer. You know, like, I'm getting a little sad right now.
Yeah.
But that's why this festival is incredible, because we can rediscover these voices that might be buried under layers and layers of programming on our streaming services.
Well, I think it's also education. A couple of years ago, I was trying with the New York City schools to say, you know, films, why aren't films used in schools, in public schools, to teach? Like, why isn't a film like Tootsie, you know, at the time, it was all these films about children all over the world, these fabulous, not just documentaries, but narrative films, and they're already done, you know? Why haven't we taken the idea, it's hard when you do a play, you have to do a whole production, you know what I mean? But why isn't there a move in the education system to use films? Because I think if films were used instead of just books for social studies and history and art, that that kids would grow up with an appetite. I saw the Kurosawas when I was 14, 15 years old. I saw in Oberlin, they had all of those series. So I go to Criterion now because Criterion is the only place you can go to see a lot of these great, great older movies, which still are better than most movies now. I mean, they were very subversive and interesting and dynamic and artistic and great, great artists. But I do believe if somebody knows how to do that, I really think film should be used in school as a major, major tool. It's so easy to do. And having kids come into an auditorium and see it, not just see it on their computers, but really be in that would be an extraordinary, it create an appetite and an understanding of the power of performance and being in a room together and then discussing it, talking about the film, and not just for students who want to make films, but just, you understand what I mean. I wish there was somebody, yeah.
That, I think it's because of the attention span, that it isn't,
No, you're wrong about that, no. They can absolutely watch a 2-hour movie or an hour and a half or hour movie. Absolutely, they can.
well, they can, but I think, oh, thanks. I think they can, but I think most kids, like, it's grabbing their attention and just in the way the world is now, like, they grab their attention and then it moves on to something
Yeah, but
else.
wait a second. If you're starting in elementary school, they haven't learned that yet.
If
So if you're
elementary
starting, I'm just saying public schools. I think at a 12-year-old watching a movie about a 12-year-old would be phenomenal. Plus, which it would give them an understanding of the world. And this is one of the things that I think, actually, this was a bigger part of it. Because the idea of international cinema being in American public schools would let our, the narcissism, everything that's going on with immigration and the borders, kids aren't brought up to even understand who anybody is. So I think there should be a tremendous move to bring film into public schools starting very young, and attention span will be fine. Look at, kids will say, read it again, Mommy. Tell me the story, Mommy. They have better attention spans than adults do.
I misunderstood you because I thought you were talking more about.
High school or?
Like film schools or.
No, I'm talking about public
yeah.
schools. I'm saying
Did you
use
try
it
to do
as
this? Did you try to do this in New York?
I started to speak to Kate Levin, Kate and Kanan and I were doing this together, the performer, singer, creator, and we just didn't, we just didn't form the group that needs to really do it. But I would happily, because what else I thought is, okay, let's start it in New York and let's let it go, and then have filmmakers come and be the special guest at this school, or be the special guest. I'd be happy to do that. I mean,
There is a model for that,
What?
which is New Day Films, which is over 100 independent and documentary filmmakers, that all they do is the educational marketplace in the United States. And it's a kind of utopian cooperative where decisions are made by consensus. So 4 days a year we get together to make policy for the coming years. And one of the very successful parts of that in increasing visual literacy, because I think that's what you're talking about, how do we see and how do we create? Because young people are creators now of media, is Canopy. And Canopy is a distribution platform where any educational institution can subscribe to it, and then individuals can watch the films that way, and teachers can stream the films in their classrooms, or students can watch it as part of their workload and then bring it to the classroom. So we have the technology to do it, that's for sure. And we're making it very easy for educators to do that at the high school and college level.
But
But fiction filmmaking,
Yeah,
that
see,
doesn't exist,
no,
Julie.
no. And I want it, and
But it's a model. I'm just saying that there's a
And I think it has a
model
lot
out
to
there.
do with, actually, why the arts, I grew up in public schools, and the arts were very powerful in our public schools. And that's where I did theater first, and that's where I learned about music. That whole issue of the arts being eliminated in public schools has been on our minds for a long time. But part of it is expensive, and this is not expensive. This is what I haven't understood, is to put film into schools and to make that part of it and have it be the entertainment, because it can't just be films that are you know, I mean, documentaries can be for me, they're more fun and, you know, exciting to watch than most theater feature films. But I do think, you know, getting kids to see the great entertainment films from other cultures is they'd love it. So, I don't know, maybe, what?
They are doing it in the schools to some degree. I work in the celebrity schools from elementary to high school, and they are bringing them in. But there's two sides of it. The teachers do, but they also, I made a documentary film about a jazz musician, and I tried to bring it into the schools, and the music teachers told me, oh, the kids, they don't have the attention span for it. So I was, yeah, you know, but I do see the teachers that do, the English teachers and the history teachers and the music teachers that do bring in not just documentary films.
But that may be Sauger, I mean, I don't know, because it's not in the
Well, if
schools.
it's happening there, I would think it would be happening.
I think people show documentaries in schools, we've had that. I think they don't show narrative films, and I think it is important to build that appetite because there's so much kind of consumable, bingeable TV that's what, and they don't know that they really love a 2-hour movie anymore, and I think that's what's missing, because they don't really want to read War and Peace either, but like actually, you know, when they start doing it, they actually are like, wow, that's good, you know, so I think it's a similar muscle that needs to be exercised.
Got a question here in the front, and then to you.
Well, just commenting on that as well. I do film marketing and publicity and have also worked on a number of entertaining but also Thank you. I'm a film marketer and publicity and distribution, but I also on the side teach a college course. Now it's college students and it's called Movies That Matter. And the focus, I think all documentaries matter, but I really try to find feature, dramatic, theatrical release films. I've worked on films like Philadelphia, for example, and I bring that into the classroom because that's a very accessible film to learn about AIDS, which is what was Jonathan Demme's intent. So we have a whole model where every week it's a different issue. It could be human rights, it could be sexual discrimination, it could be genocide, it could be whistleblowers, with a whole list of films for homework and then screen one in the classroom. So there's a model, but in terms of doing it younger, I absolutely agree to start as young as you can. And there are many films that are both entertaining, so you draw them in, and then at the end of it, they've had their awareness raised. And they're global films as well. A lot of international films like Water by Dupamenta, films like that, The Lives of Others, et cetera. Anyway.
Beautiful. Yes,
Thank you.
right here in the back. Right, yeah.
Hi, it's a great panel, and I had a quick question about, I wonder what the role of private equity is. What's happening to the people that used to invest in independent films? I'm a producer, and I've developed a bunch of film financing classes. I teach at the Brooklyn College Grad School, and the filmmakers that we're training up they always thought they would get the money from people who want to invest in art and be patrons, and it feels like all the money is coming from Netflix and Amazon and Apple, but what happened to the people that used to
They just
write
need to
checks?
call Geraldine.
Well, we have two film funds. We have Impact Partners, which invests equity in documentaries, and then we have a new film fund called Game Changer, which is a fund that's really about a point of view. It's about diversity and inclusion, and it's private equity. It's a subscription-based model, and there are a number of private individuals and foundations that, I've made the argument that film is a social impact investment because it's an investment in culture, and it's an investment in diversity, and it's an investment in representation, and it's an investment in democracy, and it's an investment. Film is just an investment. Storytelling is just a good investment. And what we're finding with the landscape changing is you can't depend on a return that's sustainable on independently financed films, so that there's more of a portfolio approach to production, which is what Dan and Liz are designing, right? So that you can do some development funding, you can do some television, you can do some podcasts, that there's more of a diversity. The days when Ann Carey and Ted Hope were returning 30% equity returns to individual films they're gone. It's costs more and you make less money to make these films. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't investors that are interested in investing in this as an enterprise because it's important to the Republic. It's important, it's fun and it's rewarding. And you can get your money returned and you can make some return on your investment. But to ever tell someone that they should be getting a guaranteed return on any equity investment in film is just not fair, because it's not true, right? So you have to really go into the investing side, I think, with the idea that you're doing this for some other reason. And nobody wants to lose money, and nobody wants to have money mismanaged. So it really becomes about the same way that curation matters. It's like, who is helping you pick the films, creating the funnel, making the investments, so that you can support really important artists. But it is there. I mean, there are equity funds out there. They're just smaller and more boutique-y than before. Yes?
Yes, hi. I wanted to tell you that I created, produced, and conducted a concert 2 weeks ago at Alice Cullen Hall to a sold-out crowd of 1,000 people. And I teamed with 8 leading Hollywood film composers and conducted an orchestra that I founded. And I self-made a documentary that covers 800 years of feminist history in 80 minutes.
Wow.
It's a silent documentary. It took 2 years to produce by myself, and there's moving and still images of women from the 13th century, and comes up to climate change activists and people in indigenous communities. And people were crying during the concert, throughout the concert, and crying outside. And they were deeply moved, and it's a nonprofit thing. Nobody got paid. We all worked for free because we want to be the change that we want to see in the world. And my dream is to get this out to the New York public schools. It would take probably 2 semesters of a college-level women's studies course to cover the lineage that I show in this trajectory. And
What's the name of your film?
It's called Women Warriors, The Voices of Change, and it was just at Lincoln Center 2 weeks ago. And,
Congratulations.
thank you. And I would just like to get it out there. We hope to bring it on tour to different cities, because I've toured to 22 countries with other productions, so we would love to get it out there. And like I said, it has a journey, it has a purpose. It's going to go out and do the work it needs to do, and it won't make money, but it's to evoke a change.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Don't say it won't make money.
Right on.
I don't, you know, like, because maybe you need to step back and look at all of the components and how you can monetize them in various ways, and how you can package and sell and partner. Because I think it's incredible what you have done. And so don't limit yourself by saying, like, it only can be this, and it can't make any money.
Yeah. I think we're getting towards the end of our time. Is there any other questions? Yes, front row.
Well, I know that you're doing something now where Pamela, you're doing something that's involving other communities all over the world to kind of deal with human rights. And could you just kind of go into, this is something you've just kind of started doing in the last?
You mean Solidara Labs?
Yes.
Sure. Well, Solidara Labs is a 5-day immersive laboratory that we've been doing in different countries. But right now, we're actually doing a transnational Solidara Lab, which is, well, we're making a new film called Borderlands, and it takes place on the US southern border. And it's about immigration, but it's about really Americans who are standing up and defying American government policies about immigration and finding very creative and innovative ways of doing that. And so at the same time, we're bringing together filmmakers on the border with social justice activists on the border to come together to create their own projects around that. And we've done different Solidarity Labs before in Colombia and Mexico and Guatemala, but we've never done one in parallel with the production of a film. And so we're experimenting now really with the synergy of these ideas in Solidara Labs with the actual production of the film itself. And I think it's interesting because we are moving into more and more in the nonfiction realm, participatory filmmaking. Because of our ability to be able to communicate across multiple platforms with people anywhere in the world, we can work on things together. We can communicate. I can follow people's journey up from Central America via WhatsApp, in text, in photographs, and in video, and make it part of a film. So, like, I'm the filmmaker. I mean, I guess I'm orchestrating the film. On the other hand, I'm having participation of multiple people who are feeding into the ideas and the imagery in it. So Solidara Labs is really meant to create ongoing networks, human rights and artistic networks that survive beyond the laboratory and that create projects that will impact both movements and the artistry of making these nonfiction films.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
That's a very cool idea because you're embedding, you're allowing, it's, when you think about the sustainability of the activist or the
Right.
films doesn't necessarily just have to be a platform about the issue and the activist, but the community and everything that's built around it. Well, unless there are any other questions, I think, did you say that we had, oh, we have 10 minutes. Oh my God, well then, if we have 10 minutes, yeah, go. Sorry, I saw the 2-minute.
I just wanted to mention that, you were talking about, it brought up for me this very nostalgic memories of the art house theaters in New York City. Like the film, when you were talking about the Film Forum, and there used to be an anthology film archives, and the recently closed Lincoln
Plaza.
Center
Yeah,
Cinema, and just all of these, in Quad, where where you would be able to see all of these, artsy type films, or which if you don't have a day job is very, very difficult to participate in that scene. But many people did, and experimental works, and so it brings back this whole, for me, this whole kind of thing and these films that that need to be monetized somehow, and need to be, because people have to live and survive, right? So, but it does bring back those days, very, very, very happy and nostalgic memories for those great films that showed at those places, some of which are not there anymore.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's true. There's a pretty amazing organization called the Art House Convergence, where there are like 186 art houses that are trying to share best practice, trying to share, like almost look at ways that they can share in the marketing and the back office side of promoting a film, or maybe taking, I don't know, a filmmaker on tour to 10 cities and sharing that and organizing it. Or, for example, we've been innovators in creating programming for children. We started a program called Sundance Kids at Sundance, where we curate 3 or 4 films from other countries. And can we, instead of distributing it, if we can't get a distributor in the United States to promote it, can we get 10 to 20 art houses to pick it up so that we can start to build these audiences? So it is a very important social infrastructure. And I think that people don't understand what they're going to lose by losing them, because it is a gathering place. It's like a coffee house. It's where people go and sit and they talk about ideas and they find like-minded people, and it's an improbable tent, the people that you discover in these movie houses.
I wanted to make one point just to fill in a little bit about what you're saying, Geraldine, and what Lisa mentioned, which is nonprofit or the not-for-profit model. That doesn't mean you don't make money. Okay, what it means is that you can actually attract money from foundations and charitable foundations that can only give to not-for-profit organizations. So rather than going from project to project to project, and film to film to film, and having to raise money for each individual film, you can actually create an infrastructure that will attract money. And that way you'll know that for the next 3 years, I'm going to be getting this amount of money in yearly increments. And it really helps with the creative process. To know that you have this cushion to rest on, to develop your ideas and to take your ideas out, to research them and to take them out into the world in a credible way.
But what level of budget is that? Because, I mean, it's just the cost of films.
Well, you know, you don't, if you have, if you're not for profit and you're attracting funds for general operating support, okay, then you don't, your salaries are being paid and you don't have to raise as much money for the film project itself. So it allows you to be a lot more nimble. Obviously, nonfiction films, you know, we're making films in the realm of $400,000, $500,000, $1 million. We're not making it in the 10 or 50 or $150 million realm. I'm just saying for some people who are here, part of the audience, that may be a model that you're thinking about, and that not-for-profit doesn't mean that you don't make money. It's really, you know, how you manage the money and how you reinvest the money in the projects that you're doing that make it not-for-profit.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, first of all, I just would like to thank you all. I'm really grateful that that you are all showing up here as women who are stepping into your power to claim being women in film, and especially in light of some of the issues that have come up about how our culture limits women, how we make ourselves small. And I'm struck, now I know this is a festival and there are a lot of things going on, but I'm really struck that this room is not packed. And I'm kind of wondering what keeps women from showing up here and here and listening to you and being inspired by you and collaborating and congregating together. So all of these ideas that you've been talking about, how we can have women come together to watch on the big screen, how we can teach in schools. I was just wondering anything that any of you would like to share with us about your ideas about how we can really step into our power as women and show up to support you and each other in continuing to combat a culture that still does suppress us, and yet not be victims, but to be powerful.
Beautiful. That's a big question. I'll let Lisa take the lead there. I can
Sure.
tell.
Well, shameless plug, my doc that's showing tomorrow, the remix. Not only did we look to reset a narrative that was inclusive of women's contributions to this really important hip-hop culture, I was very intentional in who I chose to tell the story. And so all the brilliant scholars and thought leaders in that space who are women are, you know, the people who take us on this journey in this film. But also my crew was 90% women. So, I think as we are, sometimes it feels Sisyphusian, like we're pushing, we're almost there, boom, it's rolling back. But I think, to do this, it's not just about the stories, it's about who we are empowering to join us on the team and to help these young women on these sets realize, like, wow, they can become a director also. They can become a producer because they're seeing it in action. They're seeing how our team work together. So I think the content is very important, but it's also behind the scenes, the teams that you build and how you support and empower one another.
And also watching, showing up for the, if you go to the movies, like RBG had what was the film about her called, actually? Yeah, on the basis of set, right, like going, voting with your feet, spending your money at the theater and, or watching those movies online, that all means a lot. That all generates that content. I mean, the reason it was hard for me to make that movie was because of, box office numbers against actresses, right? I mean, those are the things. So I think that it's about, showing up, with your dollars and your eyeballs and all of that too, which is creating opportunity as people see, that these movies actually make money, and that's what generates it. I'll also say it's Saturday morning at 10 a.m., so maybe it's packed, and given the timing of the
That's pretty
panel.
good.
Yeah, we're very appreciative of everybody not having a lazy New York Times reading morning when there's plenty to read about, and instead come here. So.
People often ask me why most of the protagonists in my films are women. And I've had to think about that long and hard because I didn't really go out specifically to do that. I just found them to be so much more interesting.
That's right.
And not only that, but you know how people this overused term of unprecedented access is used in documentary filmmaking, but actually, access or people being so generous of spirit and intellect to give us carte blanche into their lives is a real thing. And it's psychological access is really important too. And I've just found that I have that connection with people, and they have that connection with me. And that makes all the difference in the world in telling a profound story. So we need to show up to support those films, as Liz said, that have these protagonists that are profound.
What do you think, Julie? What do you want?
I didn't realize we were going down
Well,
there.
I mean, I'm selfishly thinking about the Glorias and how that can be a great activist tool or a great way to show up and.
Well, I mean, I can't go into it deeply, but we did get the money all not for profit for the Glorias. And it's not a little bit of money, and the idea is that if it does recoup, should it recoup, the money doesn't go to the investors, it goes to women's causes. And it's up to Gloria Steinem to decide where the money goes. Okay, Julie. And that's pretty, I mean, I think they figured, I don't know. No, people are, because it's going to be a commercial movie. So, but it meant that people couldn't add to the investment if they were interested in recoupment. They can only give. And and through Geraldine and connecting, we have already started women, mostly women, I would suppose, but wealthy people with money who want to help with an outreach, because I don't have any faith that, we don't have a distributor yet, so I'm at that point. I'm not finished with the movie. I don't know who's going to be the commercial distributor, but I am, and Gloria is absolutely committed that in the next, this is a movie about activism, and it's about getting women out to vote, and it's about, lots of things, but it will be used in outreach. So when we were discussing, or you were discussing, I think this idea that you don't have to make the money, get the movie out there, you want it to be seen, we're artists. We just want, especially if you're doing a movie about the kind of topic that Gloria's is about. So, yeah, I'd love it to get all the other stuff, and we missed this festival and that festival, maybe we'll be in one, we don't know, but I know that we'll get the movie out anyway. We will get it out in one way or another, and there should be other means, and I know the people who invested in our movie, they did it because of Gloria. I mean, that we had a real, that's a rare thing. I'm not going to get that on my other films, I mean, I keep listening to you and going, every time I try and make a film, I can't get the money. I mean, it's just, people perceive that I've been successful, and I have in The Lion King, but not in films. Not in films, because, whether you liked Frida or Across the Universe or Titus or what, they weren't distributed. And what happens is, the way that the press and the public, and it always baffles me, they're unsuccessful movies because they didn't make enough money. Now, the reason they don't make money is because they weren't distributed. It's this catch-22, and people don't seem to catch that. If a studio doesn't want to spend money on marketing, movies don't get out there. And now, unlike when I was 18 or 19, where you didn't judge a movie by box office, in fact, that would have been, oof, can you imagine talking about the commercial success of a movie? You wouldn't. When we saw all of the art films or the foreign films that we saw growing up, we would never, it's almost like how television changed. Everybody put their nose up to, now television is where you get the good stories. But I think that young people have no idea about that. That box office does not mean that a movie is worth seeing or that it's good. So that's a very hard thing to battle as well, which is the success. So as a filmmaker, I don't have tons of people saying, oh, make another film, because even though they know, these producers, they know, they'll say, oh, how much box office did it make? Oh, her movies don't make any money. She's an artist, watch out. So I don't know how you fight that if you know, and I did have I had Sony for Across the Universe. They spent a lot of money, but we got into a battle about the cut, and then they just went like this, and none of those people at the head are still at Sony, but still, they didn't release the movie. It made a lot of money on DVD, but no one talks about that, because people saw it many, many times. Kids went back, but they didn't distribute it. So it's very disheartening to figure out how you can make a company. I've thought about it. Now she's talking and they're talking, I'm going, oh, I'm too tired to do that. No, I'm seriously, I say, I don't know if I can go into that and then be responsible to a company. So I've been freelance my whole life. But that is a very difficult place. And the only reason I am able to do a movie like The Glorias and spend 4 years on it and put my own money into it, because even at that point, there's a point where we're just about to be able to begin shooting and we don't have enough money, and I'm looking around, all right, I'll put in the money, because I'm lucky enough to have The Lion King. Theater has supported me, not the film industry. But that's an unusual situation, because most theater doesn't.
But that said, I mean, just to take The Glorias for a moment, because it will be coming out next year and it is an election year. I mean, RBG, the documentary, did I think $11 or $14 million in the box office, not by accident. They actually got women's law firms, women's judge associations and law firms to buy out theaters. It was a very deliberate, strategy. And I think we're going to have to think that way when we think about The Glorias, because I think we want people to buy out theaters, to have discussions, to do voter registration, to kind of aggregate audiences. And that is something that all of you can do that love movies, is bring people along. So I think being intentional about that with different networks and it's going to be important. It will be a mistake on our part if we don't think about it, and when you have an opportunity like with The Glorias. Hillary, any thoughts?
About.
Well, we were just talking about.
I was like, yes, yes.
How can audiences support? How do you want to be
No,
supported? How do you think we should be
I think all of
supporting each other?
I think all of the above. This idea of there are ways to book cinemas for screenings if a film catches your eye or you catch it at a festival, and you want to give it a home. I also think, bolstering the PR, as Julie's saying, a lot of us are up against, a lot of louder voices. So, just getting out there and emailing 25 friends, you have to see this. I just heard this person on the radio, or, hey, let's go get together and do this together. Right. You can also certainly look to Kickstarter and things like that, where there's filmmakers crowdfunding all kinds of interesting things, as well as non-for-profits that are putting together important documentaries. The interesting thing is we're at a time where you can directly fund things, you can directly make things, the kind of small production I was talking about. And you can actually, I forget what that's called, where you book a theater, but it's doable. There's all kinds of little four-wall, no, but I mean, where consumers, Fathom, where you can create an event, you can create an event. And I don't know if that will take hold or not, but I think all of that is really, really, really interesting. I also hope this country starts funding both production and exhibition at some point. I think there's a reason that when you think about female filmmakers with a resounding body of work, present company excluded, a lot of them are European filmmakers because they've been funding filmmakers, they've been funding exhibition. So this idea about the schools isn't a small one. The idea about the libraries were the bread and butter of filmmakers for years in terms of being able to survive financially. There's ways on sort of governmental levels that we can all keep in mind that film's an art form that needs to be supported financially, because the brute force market is not not maybe going to do it. But I think you're here, so yay.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. Have a glorious, glorious day out there with the leaves swirling and the sun shining.
What's your distribution? I mean,
Thank you all so very much. Thank you, thank you. Don't go. I want to have, Geraldine, I want to have a quick photo with everybody.